If you want to get a head start, you can grab your Bible this morning, open it to Genesis chapter 37, which is really just a way of reminding you to open your Bible once in a while. I know it's hard to read in the dim light of the room, but it's good practice. You can also use your phone or device as well, as long as you're not checking your stocks or playing Candy Crush or some other variation of way to ignore what the pastor's saying today. All right? We're in the series, Don't Take the Bait. The title of today's message is, It Burns Me Up. It burns me up. Now, I know right away, I know that is an old people thing to say. Like, I don't hear my teenagers running around going, you know, Mom, what really burns me up? Like, my teenage daughters have never said that. But I can recall an uncle or possibly a mother or father over the years saying that, and maybe it's possible that I said it. I'm not too sure, but have you ever been there? You know, you've ever seen this maybe go down at your house or with a group of friends? Hey, what's wrong? Oh, I've had a bad day. Somebody was a real jerk. They ripped me off. They flipped me off. You can insert whatever expletives they used on you. And then it's this, right? You know, it really burns me up. And then usually from there, the rant continues. And the rant is inevitably and always, when someone uses the term, it really burns me up, they're always talking about something that has offended them. And, well, I suppose I can just jump right to the end of the message. It's true. It burns you up. But what is not to be lost on you this morning is that's actually the point. The point is that it burns up. Now, stick with me. We're going to get there by the end of the message today. And I have a special treat for all of our Gen Z people in the house this morning. And for those of you who are boomers, those of you who are Xers, and probably even millennials, I'm sorry, you're just going to pray that you also can interpret what you hear when we get to that place. But let me start by saying this. Once again, if you would like to read along, something that would be helpful for this series to read along, it's The Bait of Satan, John Bevere. Great book. It's an older book. But man, it is tried, tested, and true in the principles that it reveals, the things we can use to our advantage living in this world. Let me start with this. There's two categories of offended Christians. Now, it's very important that we qualify this right off the start. I'm talking about offended Christians. If you're here this morning and you have not submitted your life to Jesus, offense for you is you're living in a different reality of what's internally permissible. But for Christians, because we believed in our heart and we've confessed with our mouth that Jesus is Lord, that God raised him from the dead. So we are confessing or professing Christians. Because we have said that, there's two kinds of offense, two kinds of offended Christians. So the first one, we're going to put it up. Those who have been genuinely mistreated. Or if you remember last week, those who have been genuinely betrayed. And then there's the second, those who think that they have been mistreated. Very important distinction, because at the end of the day, I want to be clear with you. I want to cut straight to the quick here. Boy, that's an old person thing to say, cut straight to the quick. Man alive, I am getting old. People accuse me of being grandfatherly this morning in the huddle even. That was also weird. Anyways, I want to cut to the quick. I'm not even going to bother to address the second one. If you are a Christian and you are living in the realm of, well, I think I've been offended, get over yourself. Seriously, I love you. I'm saying this in love. Get over yourself. Smarten up. Do you literally need a spanking? I will send Carlisle or Ed or Tyson to give you a spanking. That's what elders do in the church. You know, they hand out the discipline that the pastor shouldn't have to hand out. No, I'm just kidding. I will spank you. I will bring 7 men over to your house. We will give you a licking, straighten you back out. Listen, we would be here forever trying to deal with the thought processes of offense. Most often, here's what's happening. The people in category 2 have accurate information, but have discerned inaccurately that information. So they have accurate, but because it's a thought, I think I'm offended, I'm choosing offense, I'm living in offense, it's because you're doing the wrong thing with the information that you have. And it's not that you were really mistreated, it's that your process is wrong. So for the times that you might fall into category 2 as a Christian, get over yourself, please. Love you, Get over yourself. So let's look to the Bible now, though, for people, and it is all of us, Christian or not, wherever you're sitting in this room, you do fit into category one. You do. And maybe that's, in an ironic way, maybe that's good news for you this morning. Don't worry, you're not just someone the pastor scolded. I'm a category 2 person. No, you're a category 1 person for sure. You may be a category 2 person. Get over yourself, category 2. Let's focus on the category 1. People who are genuinely mistreated. I want us to look in the Bible at the story of Joseph this morning. You know the kid with the Technicolor dream coat? See, that also dates myself and makes me sound older, because most of you don't even know that was a musical and not necessarily biblically accurate. But anyways, Joseph is the kid in the book of Genesis who had a very, very fancy coat. Mr. Fancy Pants himself. Let me just start. Let's acknowledge, I should say, Joseph with the colorful coat. He's immature. He's a bragger. He's a tattletale. He's a lot of things. But the most important thing I need you to take right now is that he is a category 1 offended person. Now let's get into it. Genesis 37, verse 1. Now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. And these are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a vari-colored tunic. Your translation will read a coat of many colors. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. Then Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Please listen to this dream which I have had. For behold, we were binding 7 sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf." Then his brothers said to him, "Are you actually going to reign over us? Or are you really going to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. All right, first of all, if you're a little brother in the room today, don't be stupid. You should never, ever say things like this to your big brother. They will beat the tar out of you. I'm just telling you facts. I mean, I'm the pastor of our church, and if my youngest brother Curtis comes here, I promise you, if he would have run his mouth that way, myself and his other 2 older brothers, we would have tuned him in all the way to next week. Big brothers don't tolerate little brothers running their mouths like that, right, Logan? Like, they just don't. It creates enmity. It creates competition. And there's always, if you're in a family, you know the family dynamic of the tension of the oldest to the youngest. And it's actually a very natural thing. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's a real thing. It's a natural thing. We can all observe it. But I think that what was happening in Joseph's life and the way he went about sharing that, certainly, let's say it placed a bit of a target on him. So it goes on to talk about how Joseph had another dream. He related that to his brothers. And that one was about the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all their stars bowed to his star. And it made it even worse for him. He related it to his father and to his brothers. And even his father rebuked him and said, "What's this dream you're talking about?" So his brothers went to pasture the father's flock in Shechem. Israel says to Joseph, Are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come and I will send you to them. And he said, "Father, I'll go." And so then he said, "Go now and see the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring a word back to me." So he sent him out to the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem, and a man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. The man said, "Hey, what are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me where they are pasturing our flock of sheep." The man said, "They've moved on from here, and I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers, and he found them there at Dothan. Now, when his brothers saw him from a long distance, before he came close, they plotted against him to put him to death. Wow, that's offended. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say a wild beast devoured him. Then let's see what will become of him and his dreams." Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him. I'm a dreamer, and I have felt that before. And some of you are dreamers, and no doubt you have felt that before. The enemy hates a dream. The enemy, Satan specifically and especially, hates the God dream that exists over your life. And that's not a theological term I'm using, the God dream over your life, but principally, it is theologically accurate. God has a plan for you. He has a dream for you that is bigger than what you can imagine. And that doesn't make you the center of the story, but it probably still means that you're an integral part of what God wants to do, because if the maker of all things chose to make you and put you into his plan, you're significant. You're not the most important person in the whole wide world, but you are absolutely significant. And you should have a dream for your life. We all should have a dream for our life. And let me just add this for free. I hope that your dream offends a few people. Just a little. So the scene is set. The brothers are plotting to kill, except for one. One of his older brothers, Reuben, seems like maybe he was an okay guy. And so Reuben attempted to rescue him. Reuben thought, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'll go along with this, and then once they get done what they're going to do, I'm going to sneak him back to Dad and spare his life. Everything's going to be okay. Well, in the process of what was going on, Reuben had wandered away to do something, presumably, and the brothers grabbed him, threw him in the pit, and while Reuben was gone, they noticed a caravan of slave traders going by. So they realized rather than kill the brother, they could sell the brother. I mean, why waste good meat, right? Well, you laugh uncomfortably, but I mean, let's face it. That's what slavery reduces people to in this case. They thought, why shouldn't we profit? We don't have to kill him. We literally won't have blood on our hands. I can see the religious mindsets working here, and kind of like, oh man, we're going to kill two birds with one stone without killing anybody at all. That's beneficial. So they do. They actually sell him to this caravan of slave traders. Creates a problem. Reuben is distraught. He cannot now do what was ultimately right. I mean, he should have stood up and maybe fought the whole works of him to do what was right. But in the process of all this, here's what happens. The brothers go home to their father Israel. They have to say, Dad, the son you love is dead. Wild animal got him. They still lied. What really had happened, though, was Joseph had been sold to this caravan of Ishmaelites and then eventually sold into slavery in Egypt. So we come to this guy Joseph, the baby of the family, the favorite of the family. Like, he was the one. I mean, he didn't even have to go do chores with his brothers. They had to go tend the sheep. What was he doing at home at 17 years old? Hanging out, playing video games, being a bum, just like all youngest siblings are. He was just doing his thing. Xbox all day, probably got to drink Coca-Cola, eat good steak every night. You know, whereas his older brothers had to go to church and share meals and not be allowed to have pop at restaurant outings on Sundays after church. Oh, I'm telling you about my childhood, right? Yeah, it's unfair. So I'm not offended about it anymore, because I too am a man with a limited budget now, and my kids are like, "Can we get food?" No, Mr. Budget says no, we can't. Anyways, Joseph is now sold into slavery in the house of an Egyptian guard or captain named Potiphar. Everyone say Potiphar. Weird name, right? Maybe that'll make the name list for 2025. Who knows what could come back into style with this new generation. You could see some really weird names come up, I think. Nobody's naming their kid Potiphar these days, to my knowledge. So Joseph enters service as a slave, as a strapping young, handsome man in this house of this captain named Potiphar. Now, I'm going to read to you from a translation that I wrote just this week. Now, there's another translation out there. It's legit. It's the Gen Z translation. But I didn't have access to it, so I spent a little bit of time on the Wikipedia, and I studied up real good and got very good at the language of Gen Z. And so, older people in church this morning, good luck. For everybody who is under the age of 18 or 21 or something like that, hear the word of the Lord, okay? Now, all right, I'm going to try to get through this. I have to enlarge I have to enlarge the print just a little. Ay, ay, ay. All right, here's how it goes. This is the story of Joseph and Potiphar. Potty's bougie wife was straight risen on young Joe. She be like, your fit drips, bae, you's lit. You is bussin', and I want to hook up, like add you to my body count, because Potty's away making bank. This feels like sin. But young Joe was chill and super based. So he was like, no, girl, I ain't up. I'm not looking for a situationship, not even a soft launch. But she was simping on Joe, simping real hard because he was the fresh little young hottie. But young Joe understood the assignment and said, no means no. You need a vibe check, boomer. The clapback was super intense for Potty's wife, and she went from looking at Joe like he was bussin' to a legit op. She capped and tweeted, hashtag me too, and all her moots believed legit. So they threw young Joe in the clink. Now let us pray that we may interpret the tongues. Basically, I feel my dad's sitting on the front row. Okay, Dad, so what just happened here was the story you grew up with Joseph and Potiphar. It hasn't changed. Same thing still. And you can book a counseling appointment if you need one now. I don't get it. I don't get it. Basically, Joseph chose to be an upstanding, moral, fearful servant of God and rejected the voracious oncomings of Potiphar's lusty wife. And it got him thrown in jail. She accused him of rape. He literally had to leave his cloak and run away from that situation. And, right away, I think that if we look at the storyline, Joseph being the protagonist, if you will, in the story, it's a raw deal. It's not his fault he was born last. It's not really his fault that his father favored him more. I'm sure he soaked it all up and loved it and probably was, as I said, immature, tattletale-ish, and a little bit stupid at times with the privilege that he had because he was a young man and didn't know a whole lot better. But it wasn't right and justified that his brothers, first of all, conspired to kill him, and then, it doesn't get much better that they relented. They threw him in a pit, and for all of you interns, remember the word pit stands for pastors in training. That's what that stands for, and you'll find yourselves in pits from time to time. It was God's mercy. Like, just imagine this. This is the sons of Israel. Had Joseph been killed, that would have impacted the timeline of the nation of Israel. And I want you to always keep in mind, we already know, we say this often in our church, that God is working all things together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So that's always working in the background. And I want you to, please hear that. It's not, not anybody gets to say, well, God's working all things together for my good. No, he's not. He's working together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Now that can still be everyone, but there's an integral step that takes place in there with regard to the lordship of Jesus. So just always, please keep that in the back of your mind. So Joseph really doesn't get what he deserves up to this point, and now he's in Potiphar's house. He's young, he's popular, he's obvious. The Bible actually says he was a strapping young lad. So he was worth risen on. You know what I'm saying, Caitlin? Like if he was in our church, you might be risen on him. Real legit risen on him. Which is short for, was it short for again, Annika or something? Charisma, thank you very much. I don't have a concordance or a lexicon for that word. It's not fair. What Joseph has just experienced is certainly not fair. He did the right thing, and now he's thrown in jail. He's thrown in the clink. I want you to know something about dungeons in that part of the world in those days. Typically, a dungeon was hewn. That means it was shaped out of rock or carved into the ground. And often they would use an old cistern, and you would hope it was a cistern for like a dry well, not a latrine, right? You would hope. I'm hoping for these guys that it wasn't an abandoned latrine. That would be dirty for sure. But they would put him in it, and sometimes we're not talking headroom, we're talking like a 4-foot ceiling height, and they would cram the bodies in there. There was no air circulation. They were given a diet of bread and water, just enough to keep you alive, because letting you die was not good enough punishment. So they would just keep you alive. And it actually even says that Joseph was locked in his hands and feet. He was locked in chains. So you're chained in a hole in the ground, and this is what you get for doing what's right. Now, on a lesser level, not wanting to compare ourselves to Joseph's story here, but I bet you we've all experienced something like this. Doing the right thing, the righteous thing, and somehow it gets you into trouble that you don't deserve. This is what it means to be offended, even though you're being righteous. So in the process of time, it's actually over years, that Joseph is in this hole in the ground, locked up. And it happens that the king, Pharaoh, his butler, and his baker are also in there, and the candlestick maker. Different story, you're right. The butler, the baker, the candlestick maker. No, it was just the butler and the baker. They were servants in the main court of Pharaoh. And for whatever reason, it doesn't actually say to my memory, but they were thrown into prison with Joseph in the same hole in the ground. And in the process of time, they each had a dream. And because Joseph was a dreamer, remember, apparently he also could interpret dreams. He was very familiar with dreams. And so they each told him the dream that they had. And Joseph, in the middle of this hellhole, still was the kind of guy who would prophesy and speak of the goodness of God and speak the word of the Lord. Because he did. He interpreted their dreams for them. And one was a good word, one was a bad word. If you've ever sat through prophetic ministry or anything like that, maybe you can relate to the fear of, at first anyways, of getting a bad word or something that would correct you or something that was doom. And as you sit in our church, you realize that's not how it happens. That's not how it works. But the baker got a worse word, let's just say. His word was basically, you're going to lose your head and be hung from a tree. And the cupbearer was like, you're going to be restored to your office. And in the process of time, that's exactly what happened. Within a couple weeks, what Joseph predicted about their dreams came to pass. And Joseph, being a hopeful young man, said to the butler, the cupbearer of the king, he said, hey, when you go back to Pharaoh's court, remember me. Like, speak up for me. I am not supposed to be here. This was not my assignment. This is not where I should be. I have done nothing wrong. In fact, I honored my master. And I need someone to be an advocate for me. I need someone to speak up for me. And you can imagine in that moment how the butler was. Oh, of course. Of course I will. You just prophesied life, and my buddy, you prophesied death, and he died. Interestingly enough, the butler got out, got back into the presence of Pharaoh, and he immediately forgot. Now, if you read this in the text for yourself, it's not just that he forgot. I actually went and looked up the Hebrew word, and it's not an accidental forgetting. In fact, in the NASB, it says he chose not to remember, basically. He remembered not. I said, oh, that's interesting. So I pull open the Hebrew word. I look up the Hebrew word. I'm like, yep, it's intentional. It's as intentional as when God says he forgets our sin. Same word. That is a very intentional kind of forgetting. What a dirtbag. He knows that Joseph is a man of God. He knows he's a miracle-speaking man of God. And now that he is out, he's going to forget. Sorry, awkward moment. He's going to forget the guy that was really the one who gave him hope and really was a part of his functionally being released from prison. How would you do with that? I had to ask myself, how would I do with that? I mean, it's not like I've ever shared something prophetic or a spiritual insight from the Lord with somebody that changed their life for the better and they immediately go away and forget that I helped them. It's a little offensive. And I'm not afraid to admit that to you because it's wrong. When your pastors or leaders who love you and serve you speak life into you, don't worry, you're not the only one. It isn't the first time, it might not be the last time that any of us do something like this. But because of convenience or fear or insecurity, whatever the reasons might be, we choose not to remember. I'm not too sure I would have stayed the course the way Joseph did. 2 more years went by. 2 years, maybe a 4-foot ceiling, shackles and chains, the stink you can only imagine. 2 years. And it becomes convenient to the butler to remember. If you read it for yourself. You want a reading assignment, go read the whole process of Joseph starting in chapter 37 in the book of Genesis. You'll have to read chapter 45, 46 somewhere to get to the end of it. 2 years later, Pharaoh has this crazy dream and nobody knows what to do with it. His magicians can't deal with it. His seers, his soothsayers can't deal with it. And suddenly, I think the butler realizes, whoa, there's an opportunity to make a little money, to gain a little favor in the court. To be the guy who says, hey, king, I know a guy. He was a networking genius. The butler brings it up to Pharaoh. Well, I happen to know a guy who interprets dreams. In fact, he interpreted my dream to the T. He told me exactly what would happen, and things happened just as he said it would happen. So Pharaoh, having had this crazy dream that couldn't be interpreted, said, well, let's bring him out. Well, process of time, Joseph is brought out. He stood in front of Pharaoh. Pharaoh shares the dream. Joseph gives the prophetic interpretation of the dream. Some of you might go, well, what do you mean it was a prophetic interpretation? It was a prophetic interpretation because he spoke to the future of what would come. 7 great years, 7 plentiful years of harvest, followed by 7 years of absolute famine across the earth. By the way, historicity of the Bible, there are Egyptian records of this exact thing happening. This is real. The 7 good years come, the 7 bad years start. What do you suppose that did for Joseph's equity in the house of Pharaoh? Oh, he did the butcher and the baker right, he did the butler and the baker right. Awesome. He got Pharaoh's stuff right. Everywhere he goes, he seems to be making things better and not worse because he was a hardworking young man who, for some reason, was still serving God, even though he had been done real wrong 2-3 times now. He's finally established. He's finally brought to right standing in the kingdom of Egypt after years of being cast aside and put down. Literally being crapped on. Living in filth. Living in this disgusting, if you can just imagine the frustration of how disgusting it must have been for him. And yet, Joseph stayed the course. Now, many of you in this room, myself included, I think we could stay the course. I think we could choose optimism. I think we could put sticky notes and we could look up little helpful memes on our phones that would help us get through really, really offensive, hard times. I've been hard done by. And I have seen old Christians in my life who have endured great hardship, who have endured incredible offense. But I want to tell you what the problem is. As they're enduring, they're still offended. There's a stark difference here. A stark difference between how most people are and apparently how Joseph was. 2 years into the famine. People are hungry. Not just in Egypt, but everywhere. The surrounding countries, everybody is hungry. One day, as Joseph is tending to the matters of court, second ruler to the Pharaoh, guess who shows up? The nation of Israel shows up. Now, if you're following me, why did I say the nation of Israel? Because this was the entire line. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, who became Israel because he wrestled with God. The entire nation, the entire future of the Jewish people comes walking into Pharaoh's court, where Joseph, the brother they had sold into slavery, conspired to kill, lied about, covered up. This was the scandal of all scandals. Can you appreciate this morning how scandalous the upcoming of the nation of Israel even was? This is incredibly scandalous. Betrayal, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, slavery, human trafficking. I mean, it's all there. You could not write a script more filled with the hardship and atrocity. Joseph's brothers come up, and Joseph, being the guy he was, said, "See, I told you. I told you your sheaves would bow to mine. I told you your stars would bow to me." No, that's not what he did. Here's what it says in Genesis 45, verses 7 and 8. I want you to hear this, church, because this has to be the posture of how we live dealing with offense so that we can live unoffended. Genesis 45, 7 and 8. God sent me before you to preserve you a remnant in the earth and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his household and ruler over all the land of Egypt. I catch myself complaining to people, my peers, to my spiritual fathers, sometimes to my brothers, sometimes to my wife, about what was done wrong by me, how it's not okay, how it's offended me, how that works in my soul, how that shapes how I see people, how it changes how I operate on the daily. It seems delusional, and having the whole story doesn't help. Like, this does not seem like a possible response after what has happened. In fact, I feel like we'd be hard-pressed to find a person who, hey, this is my testimony. John Bevere, in his book, talks about a discovered truth, and this is how he says it. No one can take you out of the will of God except you. What you do with offense will determine whether you stay in or out of his will. What you do with offense will determine whether or not you stay in God's will. And you can see it in the life of Joseph. It's not hard to see in his life. But can you just sit for a moment and think in this for just a moment this morning of what that might have been like? I mean, the process, the day after day after day, weeks, months, years. But it's not just Joseph who's in the process of God's will. The psalmist writes about it in Psalm 139, verse 16. He says, "You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed." Have you ever considered that God has a book, like, of you? And nothing that is in that book is outside of his knowledge. And at the risk of really frying your brain this morning, nothing inside of that book is out of his control. I actually take a great deal of hope from that. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment of my life is laid out before a single day of my life had passed. 139 one of my favorite Psalms. Goes on to say, how precious are the thoughts that you think of me, O God. Can they even be counted? Psalm 37, verse 23 says, the Lord directs the steps of the godly, and he delights in every detail of their lives. Yeah, but that wasn't true for Joseph. It was true for Joseph. The whole point of my message today. Here's what's true for Joseph. That God saw Joseph before he was born. That God saw and recorded for Joseph every day of his life in a special book somewhere in the heart of God, somewhere in heaven. And every moment of Joseph's life was laid out even before a single day had passed. Like that's like before the foundations of the earth kind of stuff. The Lord directs the steps of people like Joseph. He delights in every detail of Joseph's life. And I just want you to put on the thinking cap this morning that says, right, and Joseph was in rough shape with his brothers. Family dynamic was not super positive. Thrown in the pit, pretty bad. Conspiracy for murder, pretty bad. Sold into slavery, pretty bad. Accused of rape, pretty bad. Thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit, pretty bad. I kind of wonder what the process was like in the moments he saw his brothers coming to the courtyard. Like, I wonder if he had to, like, crucify the flesh, you know? You know what I mean? I feel like I would have to crucify the flesh. I get mad at my wife for putting her cold feet on me. Like, just to be transparent with you. And not like a, oh, Pastor Trav's mad, it's so cute. Like, no, it bothers me. I don't like it. And I may have been grouchy with her a time or two. You can't relate to that, I know. See, church, God knows that we live in an evil world. God knows that we live in a world where people make mistakes. And God knows that we live in a world where people will willfully do evil, sinful things. Just like Joseph's brothers sinned against him. Now, I want to be clear. I don't believe, and I cannot see that the Bible teaches, that God causes people to treat his sons and daughters with evil. I cannot see that. But I do believe and see that he knows what they'll do before they do it, and it is absolutely woven intricately into the plan that he has for you, for me, and really for everyone. And I have to say, everyone, once again, come back to this context that Joseph, a son of the man Israel, a head of the nation of Israel, is set aside, is taken through these processes that are terrible to be put into, to be the preserver of the line. If the line of Israel stopped there, do you understand where is the lineage through which Jesus comes? I mean, there's a lot of things that hang on this historically. Joseph was, as I said before, a tattletale. He started out immature. Younger siblings, don't ever tell your big brothers things the way Joseph did. No matter how much they love Jesus, it's just not going to be easy for them to not beat on you. So learn a little humility. This is not, just to be clear, like Joseph is not the substitutionary figure for Jesus. Because Jesus didn't need to go through a process of perfecting. But in a way, he is representative and prophetic of what Jesus would do, of course. What was happening to Joseph in this process? Is it possible that in this process he actually converted from his tattletalism? Is it possible that he grew up a bit? Is it possible that he learned some lessons? It's possible to me that he had other dreams and that God spoke to him and he had intimate times in the presence of the Lord, because we know in the New Testament, God shows up in jail cells with his people all the time. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to like doctrinally make a statement and add history that isn't there. I'm just saying in the process, Joseph became a different man. And church, this is the take home. It burns me up. Offense does. It burns me up. Because it's supposed to. You see, it's a refining process, burning up. When the brothers come to him, he doesn't hold it over them. He doesn't even reveal himself at first. Because I know with my kids, like, I love them, and they're great kids. I mean, they are. I have no legitimate complaints about my children. But they're pretty quick sometimes to jump to the front of the line and say, "It was me! I'm the hero now." I was probably the same. He doesn't even tell his brothers at first. He just lets it unfold. He hears what they have to say. Can you imagine in the moments when he says, "Hey guys, you actually know me. I know this might feel a little bit awkward. I know that you might at first be alarmed, but just hear me out. My name is actually Joseph. And once upon a time, there was a lippy little brother who had a really fancy coat, and you all didn't like him very much. And you sold him to slave traders." Can you just imagine with me for one little moment here this morning, the shifting in the balance of power? I'm pretty sure some quiet whispered expletives came out of the mouths of those brothers. And I'll let you just imagine, because I know you're all saintly people. What would you say? Lauren, what would you say? I'm just curious what you would whisper under your breath, you know? It'd be a newfie, so none of us would understand it, but my stars. I don't know what you'd say. I don't know what you'd say. I'm trying to imagine it now in the middle of this, if you can believe that. Like, what a shift in the story. And what grace and what provision and what an amazing thing God was doing in the background. And I'm not trying to give you some feel-good message this morning that says, hey, don't worry, when you're offended, when you're suffering and people are taking a dump on you, and when life is hard and you feel like you're in chains and all these bad things are happening, don't worry, just keep your chin up and smile because God is doing a new thing. I'm not saying that to you at all. I'm saying we got to acknowledge what this hardship does in us. And I think that the New Testament speaks to it really, really well. Peter says this, that you greatly rejoice. The NSB says greatly rejoice. 1 Peter 1, 6 and 7, the NLT says this. So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure trials for a little while. These trials will show you that your faith is genuine. That it's being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Though your faith is far more precious than mere gold, so when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. Don't worry. For a little while, you're going to have trials. Well, Pastor Trav, it doesn't seem like Joseph was in trials for a little while. You said years. I said years, and just bear with me in this, but if a day to the Lord is 1,000 years to us, well, what would 15 minutes be? Like 7 years? 15 minutes to the Lord is like 7 years to us. A little while. Let me just ask you this question, legitimately. How offended can you get in 7 years? Nita, can you come back? Like, how offended can you get per day? Well, let's start back. Because we've been in church, I've been preaching for 40-ish minutes, maybe a little longer than that. I'm just about done. Like, how offended have you gotten this morning so far? And I hope, honestly, it's a teeny little bit offended, because in a good, loving, healthy way, I hope you're offended, some. But like in a week, how many, like tomorrow when you go to work, like how many offenses will you incur? How many will you suffer? And I look at the life of Joseph and I see over those years, the offenses, man, they just keep piling up and they keep piling up and they keep piling up on him. But it's just for a little while. That's what Peter's writing. It's just for a little while. 15 minutes to the Lord, 7 years to us. Don't worry, that's not a doctrine, but maybe it's a principle. How offended can you get? How many offenses do you take on per day? How many per week? How many per month? And I'm asking you that because what I see is that we are mortgaging our offenses rather than learning that it's a process of purification. Guys, if you keep track of your offenses and if you hold your offenses like an investment, I want to tell you the return is not going to be as good as you think it is. Like you're not going to get a house at the end of it. Well, I kept track of everything that offended me, Lord, and I dealt with it. Mortgaging our offenses rather than learning that they are passing us by as we are purified is an incredible mistake. Had this ring on my finger for the better part of 23 years. And in fact, it's actually pretty much worn right through at the bottom. What's this ring made out of? Anybody? Gold. It's got diamonds in it too. Because Pastor Amy wanted to be married to a flashy guy. She did. She wanted this ring. She wanted the ring so people would see the glint of the diamonds when I was with people preaching or whatever. At least that's what she told me. Whether you think about the diamonds or you think about the gold, either way, what is the process of gold? What's the process of diamonds? See, there's a process of purification to get them to the state they're in. And if this would be 14 karat gold, I understand that to mean something like 14 parts of it are pure gold, and there are 10 parts of it that are not pure gold. They would be other elemental alloys, copper, zinc, I don't know. I'm not a metallurgist. When you heat this up, what happens? It changes shape. That's a good one, honey. You get 100 gold stars. I'll pay you later. When you heat this up, what happens? Sure, it changes shape, it melts, separates. What do you mean it separates, Ewan? It separates from the unpure stuff. Ewan, it's almost like you're a science genius, and what you're telling our church this morning is that if we take this gold, as precious as it is, and we subject it to a temperature of approximately 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit, that the heat and the pressure created in there will cause a chemical reaction that causes the bondages to break between the pure gold and the other alloys. Is that what you're saying, Ewan? More or less? You're a genius. Ewan, you're a flippin' genius. That's precisely what happens. Well, I said diamonds. What happens with diamonds? Diamonds is an even more intense process of weight and pressure and heat that compresses carbon to the point that it becomes see-through and shiny. But it's the same chemical process. You see, the heat and the pressure cause the impurities to lose their hold. I know that you're all smart enough to see how we're landing this message. So what is offense to you and I as sons and daughters of God? Offense is the heat, it is the pressure, and please, church, understand this for the rest of your life. Offense comes to you not to hurt you, that's not God's provision, that's not the point God's trying to make. God allows offense to be in our lives because it is like a fire that burns us up. And in the process of that heat, there is a chemical reaction in the spirit, if you will. that breaks the bond between the pure gold that you are and the impurities that you have picked up through this life. The only people who don't get hurt in this life, just so you know, are dead people. If you're on this side of the grass, you're going to feel pain. And by the way, you should be thankful that you're on this side of the grass. My friend and cow mentor, Doug Vandermark, every time I talk to him, that's what he says. Well, I'm on this side of the grass. It's a good day. He's not wrong. Why is it a good day? Because it's another day that I have the opportunity to become a little bit more like Jesus. It's an opportunity to see someone I love, someone I pray for, come to find faith in Jesus. And church, I'm so excited because I have 2 friends in the last 2 weeks that I've been praying for and loving on. And they, in their own time, had to call me up and say, hey, I just need you to know, I did it. I've given my life to Jesus. And you know what the best part is both of them are going through really hard things. And the testimony of both these men is like, I can't explain the peace. I can't explain it. Right, because Jesus literally said he would give you peace that you cannot understand. It passes your understanding. I love it. So offense is going to come. Offense is going to be a part of your process. Isaiah 48:10. Here's I have refined you, but not as silver is refined. Rather, I have refined you in the furnace of suffering. God speaking to his people. I have refined you, but not as silver is refined. Rather, I have refined you in the furnace of suffering. Believe it or not, I don't know if you cognitively, if this clicked in your head or not, but that's an act of mercy. Because what would happen, just asking, what would happen if God refined you and I like silver is refined? Poof. We'd be nothing but cinder and ash, right? We'd burn up. And God's saying, listen, I'm not going to burn you up. I'm not going to destroy you, but I am going to put you through a process that still refines you. Silver's refined by fire. You and I are not refined by fire. We are refined by suffering. And the furnace of suffering begs a question. And here's my question for you this morning. Will you trust him? Will you trust him to bring you through the process of refining? Will you trust him to allow the old nature, to allow your sin nature, to allow the old corruptible part of you to be burned up in the processes that Jesus leads you through? You know, I'm telling you this morning, you're going to experience pain and frustration, and people are going to offend you, and you're going to have to deal with that offense. But one thing I can promise you with that is that you get to do it with Jesus. You do get to do this with the one who will never leave you or forsake you, the one who tasted every weakness and every brokenness that you could ever imagine. He tasted it and knows it. He identifies with your weakness, and he is with you in it. Makes me think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown into the fiery furnace. And what did they see? They saw a 4th person start standing in the fire with them, one who is like the Son of Man, the Son of God. It hasn't changed. We are put into a crucible of suffering so that we can be purified. But there's another man who stands in the fire with us. His name is Jesus. I'm sorry that it's going to hurt, and I'm sorry that it sucks to hear stuff like this. I'm sorry that scornful people are going to offend you, and I'm sorry that it's going to happen when you're doing righteous, right things. But Joseph was in the hand of God the entire time, and he knew it. I mean, maybe he didn't know it every day, but by the end of the process, he knew God had been with him and for him the entire time, that God had been preserving him and saving him, that God had been keeping him. Church, I want you to be a people who knows and believes the same thing every single day of your life. What you face has nothing to do with the level or the quality of your faith. the level and the quality of your faith have how much to do with you're going to trust Jesus, which will greatly change how you perceive the process. We used to sing a song all the time when I was a kid. I sang this song many, many Sunday nights in a church with hard wooden pews. And God broke me and spoke to me. Oh. God broke me and spoke to me many times in this song. The song's called Sanctuary. And actually, we're gonna sing it together, and I have no idea if we'll get the rest of the worship team to come back or not. I don't know. I don't know yet. I'll never forget the moments when I realized singing this song as a kid in some cases, kind of pausing midpoint going, what the heck am I asking for right now? The lyrics of the song say, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I will be a living sanctuary for you. Now, Gen Z don't know that song. They don't know how good it drips. But probably if you're 18 years or so or older, you're probably aware of this song. I want to invite you to stand this morning. And if you're willing, I want to invite you to sing this prayer with me. But I want you to understand that there is a cost as we choose to follow Jesus. Every time you choose to follow Jesus, guys, there's a cost. I mean, salvation is a free gift that costs us everything and gives us everything in return. The problem with becoming a sanctuary is there's a process of sanctification, of purification. And so what we're asking, and I've learned this lesson 100, maybe 1,000 times in my life, honestly. When I sing a song like this, I'm praying that God would put me through a crucible of offense, of struggling, of difficulty, of trial, so that it breaks the bond of impurity. It makes me more like Jesus. So Holy Spirit, I'm asking right now for every one of us in this room that's willing to make this song a prayer, to make it the offering of our worship, and Lord, and to invite you to come in this moment to do something new and different in us. Just stick with me. We're not quite ready to be done yet today. Let's sing it. If you know it, just sing it. We'll put the words up. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. It's a pretty simple song. Maybe you can sing it. Lord, prepare me, you got it, to be a sanctuary. Make it your prayer. Pure and holy, tried and true, with thanksgiving, I'll be a living for you. I feel like you're just getting the hang of it. One more time. This is our prayer. Lord, prepare me. Come on, pray it out. Be a sanctuary. Tried and true, with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. You pray that prayer. You offer your life to Jesus in the way that matters most for real. And He will begin to take your frustrations and your offenses and turn them to something that breaks the bond in your life. So that we can live with offense unoffended. To become more like Jesus in every process He takes us through.